through it, and he put it on my desk, stood up, and he said, if this is not cut in half by this evening, you are not allowed to preach this weekend.
Welcome to the Sam Linton Show, the podcast designed to help you shift your mindset, find your voice, and change your world. Sam is a pastor, coach, and expert communicator, helping leaders and entrepreneurs like you step into their purpose, speak with confidence, and make a lasting difference. So let's dive in.
It was a Saturday evening. I was sitting in my office. This is probably, I'm trying to think of when it was. I think this was probably it was probably the second time that I was going to preach at our church. I had only spoken at small groups, and this was the first time I was going to be speaking in front of hundreds, so I was very inept. I felt nervous. I spent about 45 hours working on the content, all the illustrations, videos, blah, 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 putting it all together. I had my mentor, my boss, who was with me, sitting across from the desk, and he asked if he could read my talk. So I handed it to him, and he looked at it, and he spent about 5 minutes reading it, and he was leafing through it. And he put it on my desk, stood up, and he said, if this is not cut in half by this evening, you are not allowed to preach this weekend. If I could tell you the devastation that I experienced in that moment, because I was completely floored. I had no way. I mean, how could I cut it down when I'd already cut down so much? And how could I take it away when I had already spent all this time on researching the right content and making sure the illustrations were good and all of the things? So it was absolutely fictional for me to consider not speaking all of these things. This story is a story that I believe really shaped who I am as a communicator. And it's a story that I think every person, especially executives, who want to communicate better needs to comprehend. And that is, you need to learn how to control your content. You need to learn how to control your content. So that's the subject of this particular episode, is controlling your content. We are in an age right now where information is incredibly cheap, aka ChatGPT. If you want to learn anything and everything about speaking, ask Grok to teach you, ask ChatGPT to teach you. Claude will give you lessons. So as a communicator, you now are putting the value into how you say what you say. It's no longer about information. And when it comes to information, the most important thing about the information is not what you bring in, it's what you take out to make it effective. So I'm going to give you 7 quick things that will help you to calm down your content. Most of the talks you give, most of the meetings you run, most of the engagements that you're speaking in, they really could be 5 or 6. You could take right now what you are about to deliver to an audience or what you are about to explain to your team and break it down even more. So I'm going to share with you kind of my framework, what I do when I'm looking at preparing a talk. I have a keynote coming up. I've got some speaking engagements that I have taking place. And so these are the things that I think through, and I've been doing this for 21 years. And I think if you think this through when it comes to your content. Now remember, most of what we've talked about in our podcast has been around how you say what you say, and that's important. But more often than not, the questions that we get are about what? What should be included? What should I say to make it powerful? What should I do? And to tell you the truth, people are often going to remember the what because of the how. So I try to emphasize the how because almost nobody that I know focuses on how they speak. They focus instead on how much can I jam into a talk. So I'm going to give you some of these things, these 7 parts of a framework. These are the 7 checkpoints of content control. Ready? Number 1. What in the world are you there to do? What's the purpose of the talk? So it really, really, really could be anything. What's the purpose? Now, are you there to get your troops rallied together? Are you there to motivate them? Are you really there just to give them some information about some SOPs that have changed in your organization? Are you there to cast vision? Are you trying to show them how their job really comes down to what your vision is and how you can clarify the connection? Or are you just trying to entertain and do some icebreakers? What is the purpose? The purpose is going to determine what you choose to be in that talk. And if I were writing this down, I would put the purpose as the overall umbrella. And anything that doesn't fit under that purpose, it's out. Right? So this is what that's going to do. Let me tell you what this is going to help. This is going to keep you from speaking your homework. This is going to keep you from having to explain every single element of how certain things work, and just distilling it down to what am I trying to get my audience, whether it's 1 person or 1,000, what am I trying to get the audience to do? So quick example. We just had Easter. I'm getting ready for Easter. I'm speaking on Easter. Easter is Christian Super Bowl. All right, it's the resurrection of Jesus, the most important celebration of the year for us as Christians. And when we talk about this, my purpose of the talk is to realize how much hope there is as a result of the resurrection. So hope. So I have a bunch of things that I'm putting into the sermon that I already cut out, that I'm like, this doesn't have to do with hope, and that doesn't have to do with hope, and this is good information, but it's not going to help them. So I'm trying to make sure that we get to the place where they realize that there's hope as a result of that. You can't start cutting content until you're clear about the purpose of the content. So, what is the purpose of your talk? That's the first thing. So picture that being the umbrella. Next of all, I'm sure you're shocked. Analyze what the audience needs. Analyze what the audience needs. Like, you have the purpose, but now you have to focus on what is it that these people need that my talk is going to give them. For instance, if you are speaking to a group of engineers and you have the latest financial details of the company, and you've just crafted a talk around the financial details and where things are and where the company stands, before you go out and you give all of that information, here's a suggestion. Think through what information the engineers need to know from the finance team in order to do their job better. Not just that you got the highest quality information from the accounting team, not just that you have the latest and greatest when it comes to your bottom line revenues. No. What does this information have to do with them doing better at their jobs? If you don't think of the audience's needs while you're preparing, your audience is going to think your talk was useless. And trust me, I have given a lot of useless talks. And what we do when we give a lot of useless talks is we're concerned about how we like the information, how we enjoy hearing it, what we've discovered, or unfortunately sometimes what we have to get done just to get a talk out there, just throw some things out there, and we're not considering how this is going to benefit the audience. So your content is going to immediately be honed by examining what of this does the audience need to hear. All right. So if you get the purpose down, then you'll get the audience down and you'll understand what does it matter to them, because the purpose of the talk is one thing, but how that purpose connects to who you're speaking to is another. So you want to be situational when it comes to your audience. If your purpose of your talk, let's say, is to give hope. If my audience is a bunch of kids, children, that hope is going to look different. I'm not going to talk to them, these, 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, about hope in uncertain times of the tariffs that Donald Trump has. I'm not going to do that because they don't even know what a tariff is. I think most adults don't know what a tariff is. It's a separate discussion. That's a governmental discussion. This is a podcast about communication. But if I'm not considering that, I'm going to become real tone deaf as a speaker. And it's going to show that I really haven't thought about the audience at all. It's going to make you look really disconnected, and it's going to cause you to have a lot of frustration as to why people aren't connecting with your message. So you want to make sure you trim that down. Okay, third thing, you have the purpose, you have what the audience needs. Third thing, grab some sort of framework. Get some sort of a framework around an idea. So a framework could be anything like what I'm doing. Right now I have the 7 things that I'm doing in order to calm my content down. You need to come up with a framework. So there are bazillions. I mean this, like I'm not exaggerating. There's a bazillion and a half different types of frameworks for talks that you might find useful. When we do, I have a program called the Trained and Confident Communicator Program. And when I teach teams of people, obviously I have teams there, and the teams don't all have to speak about the same things. So what I do, instead of letting the teams all come up with their own talk, I give them talks based on different frameworks. So one is a rule of 3. You have one big idea and 3 supporting concepts of those ideas. Another one is like a pro and a con analysis. There's a story, a confidence story. It's a framework I have for sharing a personal story to inspire, to compel. These are all frameworks that are not proprietary. You can get them, just ask ChatGPT to generate some frameworks for speaking. And then tell ChatGPT or Claude or Grok, I like Grok, what your purpose is, who your audience is, and what framework would be best to suit that conversation. Because if you have a framework, then you'll have things that you can plug your content in so that you have a logical progression in the content. If you don't have a framework, what often happens, unless you've been doing this a long time, and communicators that have been doing this for a long time, they can mess this up too. But if you're not used to communicating, you're going to have points everywhere. It's going to be like constellations of ideas, random thoughts, if you will. Like, oh, I thought about this, and then there's this, and then the framework is what anchors you to some predictable structure so that the people that are listening to you feel like you know what you're doing. Because you do know what you're doing, you just don't necessarily know how to say it in a way that clarifies that you know what you're doing. So use some sort of framework. A rule of 3 is a good one if you don't have anything, but there's a lot of frameworks. There's frameworks to persuade. There's frameworks to give bad news. There's a ton of these things, again, all available online. I am not going to regurgitate some of them to you, but if you worked with me as a client, I could help you find the right framework for your situation, and we could put your talk in that framework so you have some comfort level when it comes to how you speak. So get a framework. The frameworks are how the games work. I just made that up because it's catchy. But that framework is how you shape all that's going to go under that umbrella. Okay, next, this is number 4. And this one is, oh boy, you're not going to get away not doing this in 2025. So like listen to me closely. If you are not doing this in 2025, you are going to fall flat on your face as a communicator. You have to tell stories. I know. You're like, listen, I'm a CFO. I give people data. I'm not a storyteller. I know. And that's why your talks suck. I'm sorry. Real talk. All right. That's what the problem is. That's what the problem is. Because you are divorcing the data from the story. And people respond to story. Now, I am a certified trainer in the marketing framework called Story Brand. You're going to be hearing more about that in the coming weeks. I'm about to release a product about the Story Brand framework. But think about a story this way. A story has a hero with a problem in a situation. They have obstacles. They want something. They come against some obstacles. They meet a guide. The guide guides them to get what they want, and then they have either really good results or they have really bad results. That's a story. That is essentially the hero's journey story. Many speaking types of frameworks that are out there follow the hero's journey story. I use a framework like this a lot of times when I'm telling illustrations, but you're not going to connect with your people unless you're willing to give stories, or if you don't like the word story because it sounds a little too woo, it's a little too airy for you, then you're going to want to use an example. Is that better? An example. More syllables, and it sounds more business-like. I'm going to give you an example. Whatever you want to call it. But you need something that people can relate to and see themselves in. A story paints a picture of your information where people see themselves in it and take action on it. But you have to learn how to tell stories. My company is called Glint Storytelling Group because that idea is going to outlive me. My children, 100 years from now, well, if my children live to be 100, right? Okay, my children, 70 years from now, if I'm gone, I think I'll be gone, 60, 50, whatever. Don't calculate my death date. I don't want that email or anything coming. But if my kids are running this company, storytelling is still going to be popular because story has been, since the dawn of time, how people ingest information. Examples, case studies, testimonials, story. Story doesn't have to be your story. It could be somebody else's story. It could be a video. It could be a way for them to engage with your content. Give examples. What did I do in the beginning of this episode? I said, my boss said, I want you to cut this message in half. That is a story. You put yourself in my situation, you're like, oh my gosh, what would I do? What would I do if my boss told me I had to cut? Like, what would I do? You are thinking that because that story puts you right in the center of how do you calm your content down. Do you see what I'm saying? I think you do. Because stories really, really show that you have competency over your subject and that you're caring enough about your audience to give them a picture and not just information. Remember, why is this more important now than ever before? Because it's 2025 and information has become valueless. I'm not saying it's valueless. I'm not talking about trade secrets and frameworks, but let's be honest. AI is killing right now. I mean, you could launch a business using AI. You can write a book using artificial intelligence. You can figure out a way to do this. You don't have to be a genius. And you don't have to get more information. The secret is not more information. The secret is show people a path to transformation and implementation. That's why I do coaching. That's why I'm in the game of coaching. I'm not a teacher. I teach a lot, but I'm not here to teach you anything that you already can't access through AI. I am here, however, if you would hire me as your coach, to get you to implement some of the things that you learn. Because you can read all the books you want. You can study all the great communicators of our generation. You can even go online and watch YouTube videos and take notes. But until you are willing to actually implement the things that you are hearing, it's valueless. So stories are a way for people to see what implementation looks like. Okay, so that's number 4. Number 5, keep it simple. The bigger your words, the smaller your impact. Usually. Let me say it again. The bigger your words, the smaller your impact. More often than not, we use big words to try to show people that we really know our stuff. Here's the secret. You already know your stuff. You know your stuff. You don't have to impress me. But here's what you do have to do. You have to get someone that understands less about your stuff to understand more about your stuff. So that means your words should be accessible. Never use a large word when a short word will do. Never use jargon when there's a chance you could say it more plainly. I was just coaching somebody, one of my clients, about an interview. He's going on a big job interview. It's like his third interview. So we were talking, and he said, I thought I could tell them about me reading a book, and I could quote this book and tell them how I've adapted the principles to my framework, and a great guy. But I said, you don't want to do this, because you're coming across as if you care more about people perceiving you as having knowledge, when in reality, you should focus on showing how you understand and how you would implement. Remember, implementation, impartation, how you package things, how you say things, that's where the value is right now. Information, not so much. So keeping it simple, keeping it straightforward, keeping it simple to the point where it makes sense to everyone, even the person that knows the least amount about your job, that is what's going to make you a valuable communicator. There are many people, and if you want to look for an example on this, Jim in The Office. If you remember the episode with Idris Elba, when he takes over for Michael Scott, and Jim and him just don't hit off at all. Like they're really, really butting heads, and Jim is there, and I can't remember the name of the Idris Elba character, but you know it if you know it. So the big boss is like, hey, Jim, by the end of the day, I'm going to need a rundown of all the accounts. And Jim goes, yes, sure. And how would that? He goes, just a garden variety rundown of the accounts. That's all, rundown. Just give me a rundown. Well, the whole episode, and it's pretty comical, is spent with Jim trying to figure out what is a rundown. Like, what does that mean to him? Like, is this the chart of accounts? Is this how much money they're making? Like, he spends agonies of time trying to figure this out. And believe it or not, I think that happens in corporate settings more often than not. The CFO, the CEO, or you, if you're the business owner or the leader, you'll get up and use the big words, or you'll use the jargon, or you'll use the words that make you sound important, and you'll make other people feel insecure, and worse, insignificant. So the simpler, the more valuable. Keep it simple. Keep your content simple. Make it understandable. Next of all, engage. Try to engage with the content where you can actually make it applicable to the audience. This is similar to think about what the audience needs, but any way that you can get another person to buy in. I was watching this, and again, I don't want to make this political, but one of the big things that's going on in the news right now, and this time, is liberal comedian Bill Maher had dinner with President Trump. All right, now, I don't care what you think about President Trump. I'm not particularly caring what you think of Bill Maher. What I care about is that interaction, because if you could find two people that are more opposed from each other when it comes to a lot of things, I don't know many. I mean, those are two, Bill Maher is very, very staunch liberal. Trump is MAGA, you know what all that is. Okay, so one of the things that Bill Maher was impressed with, even though he doesn't like Trump really at all, he said when Trump would speak, now this is a secret, I was going to do an episode just on the communication strategy of Donald Trump, because I've analyzed that a lot in some of the coaching I've done. But one of the things that Trump does is when Trump is speaking, though he speaks authoritatively, when you're one-on-one with him, he says, well, what do you think? What do you think about this? Like, what do you think about what's going on with Iran or tariffs or China? And Bill Maher said, I couldn't believe this. He was shocked. And just that little bit of engagement caused Bill Maher to have more respect for someone that he despised. Now, I'm not saying that Trump is perfect. I'm not saying Bill Maher is completely virtuous. But what I'm saying is communication is powerful when you use it in a way that helps you connect with your audience and actually makes an impact on them. So when you are looking at your content, try to find a way where you can bring your audience into the conversation and not just keep them as a listener as you're a big talking head. You don't want that. So you want to make sure that you have the engagement. You want to make sure that you connect. And then last but not least, when all else fails, give it a dry practice. I would practice in front of a mirror. I would practice in front of maybe a colleague if you have a big presentation, or I would just do a run through with someone. Hey, I'm running a meeting. Do you think we should talk about this, this, and this, and this? Just have somebody that you can bounce that off of. So infrequently do we actually canary our content. We just assume we're going to get it right for the first time. Now, you might not be able to afford time like this, but one little bit of practice with your content might save you hours of agony of wondering, did I actually connect? Because to tell you the truth, the only way to know if you're connecting is to really evaluate how you connected. I know that sounds dumb, but you can rely on body language. You can rely on how people are perceiving you. But if you're an executive, and most of you are that are listening to this, because I tend to coach executive leaders, I'm in an executive role when I try to really speak to those people. If you're the one who makes decisions, you're not going to get a lot of honest feedback. One of the reasons why I developed the program, the Trained and Confident Communicator VIP Day program, is because I wanted to be able to give you feedback without you being worried about, number one, disappointing the people that work for you, and number two, making them feel bad about giving you the feedback. So what this program is, and I'm going to encourage you to send me an email if you're interested, is it's basically a half-day program. I call it a day-long program because you're not going to do much after. It wears you out. Where we go through some pivotal communication things that you are doing right now in your job. The last client I had, one of the last ones, he was getting ready to speak on television. And he had some social media ads, Facebook ads, all those things. And it involves a different skill set when you're speaking to a camera versus when you're having an extemporaneous, that's a simple way to say off the cuff. See what I mean? I used a big word when a shorter one will do. But an off the cuff meeting. So we worked on his posture. We worked on the way he looked at the camera. We worked on how he said what he said, how the teleprompter was going to read. I've done this with people several times. So we worked in his context. I don't have a class that tells you teleprompter, social media, how to speak in a video. Like, I don't have the class, but what I do have is a class that's specifically tailored for you. I don't do cookie cut programs. I will eventually probably release a course where there's some information that you can glean from that. However, what I found is the best thing that's worked for me is when I go and say, hey, I'm working on X, Y, and Z. I need you to help me with X, Y, and Z. And so that way I'm not giving you information you don't need. We're going to maximize your time. And here's a little spoiler alert, and I shouldn't say this, but it doesn't take a whole lot of time to become 100 times better communicator than you are now. No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. And I mean that. Just a little bit of concentration, just a little bit on your part of a focused effort, and you getting some feedback from somebody that's dealt with executives and business leaders for decades will give you enough confidence to make significant changes and, more importantly, really impact your organization. So if that is something that you think would benefit you, I want you to send me an email. podcast@SamuelLinton.com. podcast@SamuelLinton.com. I would love to be your coach. I would love to make this year the year that you communicate like never before. Because when you start this way, it really, really shows initiative on your part, and it shows your team that you're caring about them. Speaking of teams, one other offering that I have, my flagship program, the Trained and Confident Communicator, where I give you my proprietary framework. Again, doesn't matter. It's common sense, body language, pacing, tone and volume. It's based off of a book I wrote, a book that's going to be coming out here in the summer. And it is a communication framework that is kind of like your gauge of how you're really making the connection. But here's the cool thing about the Trained and Communicator, or the Trained and Confident Communicator. It goes really well when you do it as a team. So I had a group of doctors that I trained in Philadelphia, and they all were able to work together. And there's some workshop components to this where you're getting some team building and also some training. And I coach you individually while at the same time your team comes along and adds an extra layer of accountability. So the Trained and Confident Communicator program is an awesome success, especially if you want your whole team to start communicating in a way that makes an impact. So again, podcast@SamuelLinton.com, podcast@SamuelLinton.com, and we want to get you to feel confident about your message. So with that said, that's calming down your content. 7 things to do to calm your content down. This is the Sam Linton Show, and we are all about shifting your mindset, finding your voice, and changing your world. And if the leader gets better, the whole entire organization benefits. So we will see you on the next episode, and drop us a line so that we can coach you to become the communicator that you know you have the capacity to be. Thanks so much.